On behalf of European Association for Education of Adults, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, prepared for us by the Borås municipality, on the topic of EU educational tools. My name is Tina Mauric. I am project coordinator at EAEA, and we are an umbrella organization for organizations that work with non-formal education. Today, we are here because of the RegALE project and its first webinar. But first of all, I would just like to say some housekeeping rules. So everybody has their microphone off. If you need to comment on something, I would really appreciate it if you could put it in the chat. After the presentation is done, our colleagues are going to read what is in the chat, and they could actually invite you to speak and share your opinion. I would also like to ask you if you could rename yourself into your name, last name, and your organization, and perhaps also the region where you come from. We are going to take pictures because we need evidence that this webinar has been made. And we are also going to record this webinar because we would like to include it in our course. The webinar is going to be a part of 11 webinar courses on peer learning, but I will tell you about it a bit later. So the project RegALE, Original Capacity for Adult Learning and Education, was created to increase impact and sustainability or local and regional adult learning organizations by setting up or reinforcing networks among them, and also with regional and local authorities. As I said, this is first of 11 peer learning activities that we are going to create. And also later on, it's going to be shared with you through the AI learning module. And we are also going to send you all the PowerPoints after the event. Now I would like to welcome my colleague Noelia to present EARLALL and then to present our main speakers. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Tina. So as Tina was already introducing, in this RegALE project funded by the European Union, there are two types of organizations involved. One of them is the education providers and the network that represent them, EAEA, and the other ones are the public authorities. And this is us, the European Association of Regional and Local Authorities for Lifelong Learning, which is a European network of regional and local authorities dealing with lifelong learning, with education and training. The focus of our network is to provide the citizens the skills that they need for personal and professional development. And we believe that actually the regions and the municipalities have a key role to play in this process because they are closer to the citizen, but they are also closer to the education providers, and they are also closer to the economic players in the region. A few words about the reasons for this webinar and why we have come here today. So thank you very much for participating and for joining us. Well, it's an idea that we had within one of the working groups in our network and also within the RegALE project, that we feel that there is a need to promote all the European tools that are there available for education providers and for other practitioners. It's a complement and a tool that you can use to compare the different education system, to promote your own programs and to make your system, your courses, your program more international. So if you would like to know where you can write an article about your project, where to meet peers that are also dealing with adult learning or vocational education and training, if you would like to know how to create a European CV or a cover letter, if you want to know where you can find career guidance practitioner, then you are in the right place because we are going to hear a lot about that today. So I hope you will all enjoy, and we have a fruitful discussion with the high-level experts and speakers that are here with us today. Don't hesitate to post your questions in the chat. We will raise them to the speakers. And I think that's all from me. Without further ado, I'm going to pass on the floor to the moderator of the session, who is Camilla Winter, that we know very well. Camilla, she has many hats. She works for Borås Stad in region Västra Götaland in the adult education department. She is also the leader of our network working group for mobility, but she also an external expert for the Erasmus Plus Swedish National Agency. She is part of the EasyVet national team in Sweden, and she is also an EARLALL ambassador. So Camila, the floor is yours, so you can start now.
Thank you so much, Noelia. Do you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Yes.
That's good. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar about European tools. And you already have the bios of all speakers. You got it in the email, so I will introduce every speaker very, very short, and then you can read everything in the bios after the webinar. So I hope we will have a good 1.5 hours, and we will learn a lot about the European tools. So we start to open the toolbox, and it's a great honor for me to introduce our first speaker, Nina Ahlros. You are coordinator of the Swedish Euroguidance Center that is hosted by the Swedish Council for Higher Education. You are an expert in lifelong guidance. You are one of the leaders of the Euroguidance Network Steering Group, and you are also national expert within CEDEFOP's CareersNet, and you represent Sweden in the European Commission's Europass advisory group. So the floor is yours, Nina.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar on European tools to increase quality and internationalization in education. As you already said, I will try to give you an insight into the Euroguidance network, and as I am also co-leader of the steering group, Euroguidance steering group, I will try to represent the whole network when I speak. But of course, there might be some examples from the Swedish point of view as well. And maybe I should add that the Swedish Council for Higher Education that is hosting Euroguidance, it's also the NA for the Erasmus Plus program and many other international programs for international exchange and cooperation. So, and maybe I should begin with saying that Euroguidance is not really a tool. I would rather say that it's an activity that contributes to internationalization in the field of guidance. So next slide, please. Our network was established already in '92. So next year will be our 30th anniversary. And we have Euroguidance centers in 33 countries, so it's broader than the EU 27. And we have long experience, but foremost, I think we build our experience and strength on the cooperation, very close cooperation and sharing of expertise and ongoing learning that we have between the members in the network. So we build on past achievements that have worked well, but of course it's important also to adapt to changes in lifelong guidance and learning mobility. Our budget comes from national funding partly, and from EU funding partly from the Erasmus Plus program. For many centers it's 50-50, but it differs a bit between the countries. And maybe I should also say that our target group is guidance practitioners in the different countries, but also educators, researchers, decision makers in the field of lifelong guidance. So next slide, please. This year we started a new contract period for Euroguidance, and this is the overall objective that we got from the European Commission, that the guidance community develops its competencies on the European dimension in lifelong guidance. And when we as a network has thought about what the European dimension in guidance might be, we concluded that it's maybe three main aspects. First of all, the provision of guidance for learning mobility in Europe. And secondly, the exchange between guidance practitioners and other guidance stakeholders. And then also adoption and dissemination of European policy developments in lifelong guidance. So this gives us a quite broad scope of activities. And as a network, we have tried to cluster them into activity areas. So next slide. Here is the first one, the continued competence development of guidance practitioners. This will remain one of the strongest components of our work. And it includes training and support of guidance professionals in assisting their clients towards periods of meaningful and high quality international learning mobility. We also add new elements besides mobility guidance, such as better labor market information, e-guidance, topics of validation, prior learning, validation of prior learning and things like that. So in a broader sense, the training focus on assisting clients in their career development, be it in their own countries or internationally. And if we look closer at some of the tasks, next slide please, that are connected to this first activity area. There are courses and conferences and seminars, and also cooperation with national and international training providers for guidance practitioners. And during the last 2 years now, during the pandemic, most of these activities have been offered through online platforms or other web-based solutions. So webinars, for instance, distance courses that we, for instance, offer in Sweden for guidance practitioners here. And we have also made attempts to develop the concepts of mobility guidance further by contributing to international online publications. As an example, if you have an interest in lifelong guidance, I can recommend this recent publication from CEDEFOP on the professionalization in guidance. It contains many interesting articles, including ours, about the international dimension and how it can be included in the professional profile of guidance practitioners. So everything is available online. Next slide, please. We can also see a role in promoting coordination and cooperation for mutual learning and exchange and coordination across the different contexts of lifelong guidance, and support the development of multi-professional and cross-sectoral networks. We have professional relationships with associations in the field of guidance, both national guidance associations and also international organizations such as IAEVG, the International Association for Educational and Vocational Guidance, which is a worldwide organization for guidance practitioners, but also CarriersNet, which is the network of CEDEFOP that develops a database on guidance system descriptions. At the moment, we have 2 memorandums of understanding for cooperation with other organizations. One of them is with IAEVG to develop closer cooperation. And apart from this cooperation, we also have a close cooperation with the national Erasmus Plus program agencies and other relevant European networks, such as Europass, EARLALL, EURES, etc. So, and in addition to cooperation activities, we can look at some of the tasks here. Next slide, please. The first one is assisting guidance professionals cross-border mobility. We have, for example, the academia study visits that allow guidance practitioners to go abroad for 1-week study visits to different countries in Europe. But also hosting all kinds of European level cross-sectoral events. For instance, every year there are cross-border seminars where guidance practitioners from different countries meet, and we develop compendiums from these cross-border seminars and the discussions on different themes that have been there. They are available through our joint website. Next slide, please. And well, the last activity area for our network concerns being reliable and up-to-date source of information for the guidance community on the most important developments in the field of lifelong guidance. And this includes also enhancing the links to the Erasmus Plus program, especially towards supporting inclusiveness with the help of high-quality mobility guidance, but also including subjects such as sustainable internationalization and green guidance. In fact, I will attend a conference organized by Guidance Ireland on green guidance just after this seminar here today. So this is something that is also very much on the agenda in the Euroguidance network right now. And if we look at the tasks in this area, next slide, please. We provide the guidance community with information about new initiatives in the field of guidance. And we try to support the development of tools which will assist the guidance practitioners in their work, like online training tools and different kinds of apps and things like that. So more or less all Euroguidance centers have their own national websites, but we also have a European one on euroguidance.eu. And there we have a news section, and practitioners can also sign up for our newsletter. We also have a good practice database filled with guidance related practices from all over Europe, and a section with guidance system descriptions. And next slide, please. Last year, we conducted a big stakeholder survey to evaluate our network, and we got 832 responses. So an online questionnaire that was translated into 29 languages. And 93% of these respondents, they said they would recommend Euroguidance services to professionals for developing their knowledge and competencies. 82% of the respondents also considered the support that they had received from Euroguidance valuable or good, declaring there also that they had improved their knowledge and extended networking and collaboration in the field of guidance. And we also asked them what they would like our network to focus on in the future, and they answered, well, bigger focus on digital solutions, sharing of innovative guidance methodologies and tools, and more information on learning opportunities abroad. So basically, in a way, this means that we should continue doing what we already are doing, but maybe putting efforts on reaching a bigger audience. So I think next slide, please. Thank you for listening very much. And there you can see also the email to Euroguidance Sweden. So you're very welcome to contact us if you have any questions regarding guidance or lifelong guidance in Europe. There is also our website, the Swedish Euroguidance website. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nina, for this very useful information. So I think all of us will realize that the international dimension is really important in guidance. So a big thank you to you. And then Noelia, I ask you, are there any questions in the chat?
I haven't seen any question in the chat yet, but if someone would like to raise a question, please raise your hand and maybe we can give you the floor.
You have the opportunity now.
I just want to add to what I said that, I mean, if there are any guidance practitioners listening, they have probably also Euroguidance centers in their own countries. And our aim is really to enhance the exchange and cooperation between guidance practitioners and guidance organizations in Europe. So you're very welcome to contact us if you are interested in this.
So once again, thank you, Nina.
Yeah, actually there is, I think there is a question from
good.
Camila.
I have a question for Nina. Very good presentation. And of course, this target group, counselors, student counselors in Europe, guidance, student guidance, it is not counselors. But how much do you inform them of the opportunity they have to do staff mobility with Erasmus funding?
Yes, this is part of it, of course. Yeah, we try to give them well, quite detailed information about their opportunities for mobility within the Erasmus Plus program, but also within other programs that exist, including our own academia exchanges and study visits. So when we talk to guidance practitioners in different on different education levels, we try to inform them about these opportunities. Yes.
So thank you so much. And now over to the next tool and the next speaker. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Sanna Holmqvist. You are a coordinator for Europass Sweden, and you are working with EARLALL as well. And everything is hosted by the Swedish Council for Higher Education. And we can say there is the National Agency for Erasmus Plus as well.
Yes.
And you are very experienced in adult education. You are a former school leader and you were head of unit for adults with learning disabilities. So the floor is yours, Sanna, and you will talk about EARLALL first and then Europass. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Camilla. And you're also, as Noelia said, an EARLALL ambassador, so we work a lot together. I will do my best to explain EARLALL for you. And I think I forgot to write down my email addresses, but we can fix that later, I think, from Camilla and me, if you want to get in contact with me after this. EARLALL is, as you can see, the electronic platform for adult learning in Europe. And it's also, like Euroguidance, a part of the Erasmus program. And it started in 2015. And in the beginning, when Camilla used EARLALL, it was very hard to get people to use it because it had big technical difficulties and the speed was so slow that I used to say that it's good if you need to feel the room and get inside yourself and think about the meaning of life, and then you got into a new page. But now, since 2020, it's much better look and feel and a really good speed. So it's a better tool now. And the Commission started EARLALL because they wanted to get better learning opportunities for all adults in Europe. And EARLALL is doing this by supporting and strengthening the adult learning professionals with all the features there. And EARLALL is managed by different national support services, NSS it's called, 37 of them in Europe, and we all are responsible for our own language page. So everything you see in EARLALL, we translate into Swedish or other languages based on where you live, of course, and which country. So you can change the slide. Yes. This is how it looks like when you're logged in on the English site. And if you want to find your way to EARLALL, you just Google EARLALL and you will find your own language version or the English site. And you can just log in and look at all the features inside. And it's free to register, of course, like everything from all the EU tools. And well, I would really, since I also worked for many years in adult learning, I love the idea of a place where we can all meet in Europe when I started working with EARLALL, because I think, well, in regions and in large countries like Sweden and other countries, we're very separated and sometimes even isolated, at least in very small municipalities in Sweden. I think it's the same in other countries. Then it's often a very few people working with adult learning. So I think this is a really good idea of getting together and the possibility to get in contact with people from all over Europe. EARLALL is focused on these different themes, and it's also different parts of EARLALL. As you can see, some is quite new, but the different kinds of parts of EARLALL is contribute, collaborate, learn, EU policy, that's about EARLALL, and my EARLALL. And you can show us a new slide. Yes, and it's not for pupils or students in adult learning. Sometimes people think that's what EARLALL is for. It's just for people working with adult learning. And that's for everyone working, teachers, educators, academic, AL organizations, and well, everyone in formal and non-formal and formal education. So we can all meet there, and it's a good things for us all in EARLALL. You can change the slide. This is how EARLALL is organized, as you saw in, well, picture number 2. In Contribute, you can search in themes and sub-themes. That's how it's organized, the site. For example, lifelong learning or guidance or what basic skills or whatever. And there you can find blogs, news, community stories, and different events. And in Collaborate, you can find the discussions and the partner search function. And that's been really successful, I think, since EARLALL started. So if you need a partner in a project, Erasmus, or in another project, it's other kinds of product, Node Plus we have in Northern, for example, you can find partners there. And well, I know Camilla has found partners there, so it's a good tool. And there is also 2 other features there. It's collaborative spaces. That's been there for a couple of years, not that much used, I think, but I think it's really good. It's a place where you can meet and collaborate with different kinds of projects, or if you have a working group or that's spread over Europe or between different organizations or different parts of the country. And you can have discussions there and collect materials there and talk about what's the next step in your project. And I think just right now, I have a webinar tomorrow about Erasmus Space on EARLALL, and that's the Commission, the people working with Erasmus wanted EARLALL to open a new space focused on Erasmus. The structure and the technique is the same as collaborative spaces, but it's focused on Erasmus projects. So you can name you can open an Erasmus space like a room, and you can name the space with the Erasmus project name. So other projects can see your project and get in contact with you and perhaps ask questions or whatever. And in the room, it's a closed room for the people in the project, and there you can discuss things and collect materials just as a a normal collaborative space. So they really want Erasmus projects to use this Erasmus space. And in Learn, it's MOOCs and OERs and resources. Resources has been on EPALA for a long time. It's different reports and publications and best practice. And MOOCs and OERs is now it's a really good feature, I think. The latest MOOCs and OERs, one is ongoing now. It's about basic skills. And the European Basic Skills Network has produced a couple of them, and they're free. And I think it's really good. Most of them are in English, but the countries are translating some of them if they think it's an added value, and it's the same for us in Sweden. So we translated the last one in Sweden because we think it's really good. And then My EPALA is also new. It's just that when you click there, you can find your groups and collaborative spaces and blogs and whatever. It's easy to see what you have, well, everything that's about you in EPALA when you click there. And there's also a place called EU policy, and that's the latest policy from EU about adult education. And that's administrated from the CSS, the Central Support Service, the people who are responsible for EPALA from the Commission. So you can change the slide. Yes, as I said, it's every year is different themes in EPALA. And this year it's life and work skills, digital transition, and inclusive social change. As we said, it's like inclusion, but they wanted a larger name or more words. And next year it's going to be new themes, and it's about what's happening in the adult education sector and what's talked about in the Commission, and what are the focuses on the Erasmus program. So all of this is well, I'm just thinking about Swedish because I see Camille all the time, but at least it's going to be new themes, but all the sub-themes, I think, are still the same. So no matter what you want to read about in the adult education sector, you can find materials in EPALA. You can change the slide. And this is just an example for how it looks like when you when you go to themes. And then you get a long list about sub-themes, and this is 2 of them, how it looks like when you get into the English site on lifelong learning or validation of prior learning, for example. So, well, EPALA is a really easy web page. You can't make mistakes, and there is really good material there, and also a chance to get in contact with people in discussions and get inspiration from other projects. Hopefully we will get even more presentations and disseminations from Erasmus projects now when the Erasmus Space feature also is in EPALA. Because it's really, really nice blogs to read and get inspired when you see them on EPALA. And we also have in Sweden, and I think in other countries also, we have external writers. Like in Sweden, we have our only professor in adult learning who writes on EPALA, and other really interesting people who are reflecting what's going on in the sector. So I think that's what I wanted to tell you about EPALE. I hope you understood something. Otherwise, you just Google EPALE and register and have a look, and you will find your way there, I promise.
Thank you so much, Sanna. I will say a big thank you when you talked about Europass, but I would like to ask if there are some questions to this interesting speech.
I haven't seen any question on the chat, but I've seen a very interesting testimonial from Ulrika Hinel, who has recently created in EPALE an account. So I don't know if she would like to say a few words about this, maybe later, or I mean, I don't want to force anyone to speak, but
Nina raised the hand.
Yes, hi. I couldn't help hearing the word guidance, Sanna, when you talked. So
yes.
So I would like just to ask you, is there a special space for guidance counselors in EPALE? And do you know if there are many guidance practitioners actually connected to EPALE?
We don't know how many guidance practitioners. We don't get that kind of statistic, but there is a theme of outreach and guidance, where you can read blogs about guidance. And I don't know if there is a specific group about guidance, but in Sweden we had a course about guidance together with Nina and EuroGuidance had a course together for guidance counselors in the adult learning sector this fall. So we created a collaborative space for them so they could keep in contact. I don't know if there is any other.
I remember that, so I really think we should promote it to guidance.
Yes.
The possibility to cooperate in this portal together.
Yes, yes. Oh.
Good idea. Okay, thank you, Sanna.
Thank you, Nina.
there is another hand raised, and it's Ola from EAEA.
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you, Sanna, for the introduction. That was really interesting, and as I said, we cooperate a lot with EPALE, but mainly, of course, with the central service. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how that cooperation for you works between the central service and you, especially in terms of internationalization. So, for example, how do you choose what content is interesting to be shared in your country, and yeah, how, if you could maybe tell us a bit more about how that works.
Yes, in Sweden, our EPALE NSS, we work very close with other Nordic countries for EPALE, and we produce at least once every third month a specific page where we post blogs about different themes that we think is especially for the Nordic countries. So it's a lot of folk high school examples and so on. And CSS is the Central Support Service is the organization that chooses the themes for us that we are going to focus on every year. And so that is helping us to choose content. And we also think that that's why me and my colleague Helena Wallinder, who's not here today, she also works with EPALE. We think it's really good that one of us has a long history in adult education, because we think you need to know what kind of people and things is going on in the sector in the country, because it's really important to have interesting people who are known in the sector in the country to get really good content on the site, and also all the projects, because that makes it more international. So we have an external writer in libraries who is very international in a library international organization. I don't know the name, she writes, and the professor in adult learning in Sweden, Andreas Feyes, is also very international, works a lot over Europe, and so that's how we try to, and good examples and good practices and the good projects. So we try to make it as good as it's possible.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was really interesting to hear the background of.
Thank you, Sanna. No more questions, Noelia? No?
Not at the moment.
Then over to Europass, Sanna.
Yes. Yes, and if I was confused when I started to talk about EARLALL, not trying to speak Swedish, I'm now going to do my best to talk a bit about Europass. And Europass. Europass was from the beginning different documents. It started in 2004, and then it was diploma supplement, certificate supplement, mobility supplement, a mobility document, and the CV and cover letter had its own web page. And when you logged into that web page, you can do your CV, cover letter, and you could do a self-assessment tool about languages. And that self-assessment tool about languages was from the European language passport. So all these kinds of document was called Europass. When we talk about Europass in Sweden, it's often in the different organizations, they think Europass is just the mobility document. So a lot of organizations call the mobility document for Europass. That was the start. And the start is also the idea that people in Europe should be able to be mobile and work or study in which country they want in Europe. And to do so, credentials and formal and informal skills should be recognized and validated, and that we all use the same language so that we understand. If I want to be a nurse in Germany, I should be able to apply for that. Well, that's an easy example, but anyway, I should be able to apply for that job in Germany, and they should see at my credentials and CV and personal letter and whatever documents I show the employer, they should know what I'm able to do and what I know. So it's that system of EQF and learning outcomes that's somehow the base of it all, I would say. And since the summer of 2020, the new Europass portal opened. It's just called Europass, and you can see it on this slide. So you just Google Europass and you will find your way there. It's EU's way of trying to fit all these documents and all their thoughts about the mobility, as I said, in the same web page. And it's a lot of things is happening in the Europass portal, I must say. Just in 1.5 years, it's developed really, really fast, but it's still ongoing, and not everything is working as they want to, but it's going to. So I really see potential in the Europass portal. The portal is, of course, free, like everything from the EU, and you could make your own profile. You log in with your EU login. You can also take a look without having your own profile, but it's much more difficult to look around and do things there if you don't have your profile, I think, at least. Well, you can, when you log in, you can change the language to your own language, and then you can see most of the tools and other features in your own language, but not everything. So it's still some parts is in English, but not the personal ones. You can change slide. Yes, and this is like you saw on the last page, it's Europass tools, and that's your own profile, the Europass documents. There you can read about diploma supplement, certificate supplement, the mobility document, for examples, and digital credential. That's a new, I think it's 3 weeks ago, a new feature in Europass. And you can learn about the European qualification framework and validation. So that's the big part in Europass. And then you can search for courses all over Europe. And that's one of the technical things they are working with now, because all countries' data is not compatible with the European data. So now I think it's now 7 countries who had uploaded their learning information, but they're working on that. So it's going to, everything is going to be in Europass in a while. I just can't say exactly when, perhaps next year. And it's also a section where you can find jobs all over Europe. And right now it's EURES jobs that you can find in Europass when you search for a job, but they're also going to, you're working with the interoperability with other job organizations or whatever, but they must think about the GDPR and, you know, it must be secure, the data. So they talked about LinkedIn, for example, last week when we have an advisory group, Europass advisory group meeting. So perhaps that's the next step. When it comes to your own profile, you can change the slide. This is how it looks like when I'm in my profile and I would write a CV. So before the launch of the new Europass portal, you also could do CVs online. But now they have different kinds of CVs, and I think it's really good. You can choose which format you want to write in. You can choose color, that's a new feature. And it's the same with your cover letter. It's also different documents. You can choose how you want it to look. And what's really good, I think, is that if you change slide, you can store everything under My Library, as you can see on my picture there. And that, I think that's really, really good, because My Library, according to DG Employment, and we need to trust them, it's as secure as a bank, they say. So in other web pages like LinkedIn, you know, the information is floating to Facebook and Instagram and all over. But this Europass library or your own page is supposed to be absolutely secure. And in My Library, you can save all the CVs you made. So when you make a new one, you can copy an old one and change some. You don't need to start all over. And you can store your cover letters, and you can store your credentials and open badges and whatever, and also your applications if you have applied for a job from Europass to EURES. And the more technical things they are now working with, and as they promised when they launched the Europass portal, is that you are going to make yourself available for a new job in Europass. So in the future, hopefully near future, you can say that I would like an employment from Poland to see me because I want to work with as a teacher in adult education, perhaps. And then you can mark what you want that organization to see in your profile. Which CV, which credential, which open badge, and so on. And then if someone in Poland is looking for a teacher in adult education, they will find my profile. So that's something they are working on, and I think it's really good if they can make it work, and I think they will. So that's your own profile. And what about the rest? Well, you have my skills and my interests. And in my skills, there is a new tool from the Commission about where you can do a self-assessment about your digital skills. And they said it's the first place where they publish it. Perhaps it's just going to be in Europass. I'm a bit unsecure. But at least it's in Europass, and it's a really good tool, I think. And you can also choose what's your interests and what's your informal skills. And that's also things that you can show for a potential employer. Well, not now then, but when they get that part to function. And what is more going on in Europass? Well, we talked a bit before you got here, the little group here, and there are really, really big developments going on from the Commission about Europass. They want so much with it, and they just launched digital sign credentials as a feature in Europass. Of course, if it's going to be used, the countries must want to use it, but the technical issues, everything is there, so it is functioning. And if you are a accredited organization like a university and you want to use Europass for a digital credential, you can get in contact with Europass, and they will accredit your organization and show you how to do it. And then you can upload credentials, and they will be well recognized with an e-seal that should be even more. So the credentials with the e-seal, they say it's more secure than a paper credential. And this is ongoing, I know, in a lot of countries, the work with this. Because in this digital sign credentials part of Europass, it's also supposed to be micro-credentials, as all that you all know is also an ongoing work in a lot of countries in Europe, and that the Commission is, I think now in December, hopefully, is describing some what they think about it and instructions about micro-credentials from EU level at for all education, I think, because last year it was the higher education that worked with micro-credentials, and they have another structure for it than, for example, adult learning. So that's also a lot of work that all the countries in Europe needs to be doing. You can also have smaller courses like an open budget for and save it in your Europass portal. And there was something more I should say about that. Yes, now all the documents in the Europass is on their way to get digitalized. So at the advisory group last week, as I talked about, they told us that next year the diploma supplement, certificate supplement, and the mobility document is going to be digitalized, and you're going to be able to upload them in Europass then with the digital sign credentials, or perhaps the mobility document is going to be a credential in Europass. We don't know how it's going to be technically solved, but it's going to be like all the documents that were separate from the website, as I told you when I started to talk, is in the end all going to be in the portal. And that was the Commission's thought about the Europass portal from the beginning when they launched it. And the last slide, please. Yes, this is the mobility document as it looks like right now in Sweden, but you can also find it. Yes, you can also find it in the Europass portal. And I think this is really, really good document and unique, because it's the only document that, at least in adult education sector or in vet sector, that really shows what you learn when you are in on a mobility, and that sending and hosting organization are writing a signature and telling that this is what the student has been learning, and also the student is making a signature and says that this is what I've been learning. So this is also going to be digitalized, and I think I heard that in Denmark it's of a more value when you are going to study to show it. In Sweden it's, well, you don't get into an education with it, but I think it's a really good document to show an employer at least. And I talked so much now, so Noelia has showed me that I need to stop talking, and I hope you understood something of what I said.
Thank you, Sanna. It was very concrete, and everything what you told us will be very useful. And I hope that all of us will use the Polar platform and all Europass documents.
Thank you, Camilla.
So thank you so much. We take, I think we take questions at the end, and we go over to our next speaker. Is Pernilla Öberg. It's a very honor for me to present you. You are an international coordinator and work-based learning strategist at NTI Gymnasiet, and you will explain what it is in your speech. And you are a member of the Swedish expert team, and your organization is a member of the FVET, and FVET is a network, and it stands for European Forum for Technical and Vocational Education and Training, and you are a former certified teacher. So the floor is yours, Pernilla.
Thank you so much, Camilla, and thank you for inviting me to speak about our experiences using EasyVet or ECVET for high quality mobility. So my perspective now will be only on mobility issues. So I will continue where Sanna left us with the Europass mobility document. Next slide, please. NTI Gymnasiet is a national. We are part of Academedia. Is the biggest private education company in Europe. We are some 18,000 employees. We provide educational training from kindergarten up to higher vocational education and adult education. So I work in the segment regarding upper secondary education, and we have some 150 schools in Sweden, and NTI Gymnasiet is one part of this enormous amount of schools. We have 29 schools in Sweden, and our profile is in IT tech design and business and science. So we have educational programs just in these fields. We have both theoretical education programs as well as vocational. And in all our schools, we have a makerspace, hydroponic lab, and we offer our students and staff mobility opportunities abroad. Next slide, please. And this is some details about our mobility activities. This school year, we will conduct about 350 mobilities for learners. And during the autumn, we have not been able to do any physical mobilities due to the corona situation. So we have been doing 150 virtual mobilities. I think we are not there are not many others in Europe doing this kind of activities, but we have great experience using this way of traveling and learning, even though we can't move physically. And we are planning 200 physical mobilities next spring. We're also sending staff, of course, about 100 each school year. We are also involved and coordinating some K2 projects in different fields. We also have collaboration with international partners in Japan and South Africa. And we utilized the Europass portfolio, the ECVET framework, and the EQF framework as well, in order to communicate with our partners about the learning experiences we expect from for our students and staff. Next slide, please. So why a European framework for vocational education and training? Just to explain the bigger picture about vocational training in Europe, there is not one system that is similar to any other in each member state. So it's rather difficult to communicate across borders about vocational training and also vocational experience. So it's I can just make a short example. When I coordinated the K2 project from many years ago, I had a colleague from the Netherlands, and we were using ECVET to develop units of learning outcomes. And I started to explain what we were supposed to do in the project. And my colleague from the Netherlands, he said, "What is a unit?" And I said, "Oh, okay, but a unit, yeah, it's like a course." And he was not following me. And eventually, when we started to talk about this, he said that we only have like work processes in our educational system. So I understand that it's really, we are speaking different languages. And especially when we are talking to the working life, they don't understand one thing about what we are saying. So ECVET is a way to help us to communicate across borders, not just geographically, but also different sectors, areas. So ECVET is a toolbox in practice, but it's also a system and a language. And it's a way to make it easier to transfer learning from different contexts. And it's also a way to make it easier for people, of course, to bring their experience to another setting, to make other people understand what competence they have in order to, like Sanna told us, to change from one country to the other as a nurse, to apply for work in another country. But it's also a way to make it easier to compare different educational programs across borders, to understand each other. If you are studying to become an automation technician in one country, is that the same? Can you move to another country and do the rest of the training program in that country? And in the end, it's a way to build mutual trust with the world outside our schools. So for instance, employers in the working life can rely on that the students that we educate, that they have the competence we say. So it's an output dimension in EQVET. It's not a question of what teachers you have or how many hours you have done training and so on. We can guarantee these are the competencies, the learning outcomes an individual has when he or she has finished this educational program. So this is the core of ECVET. If you have no experience of EQVET, ECVET before, this is what you need to understand. Okay, next slide, please. So what is ECVET? What's the toolbox? The core of EQVET is the concept of learning outcomes, the way to describe learning. And there are different numbers of templates, you could say, or documents that we use to make the learning experience more concrete when we organize a partnership for mobility. And the different documents that we use is the Memorandum of Understanding, the Learning Agreement, and we also use the Europass Mobility for validation and recognition. But the Memorandum of Understanding is an agreement between partners about quality criteria. Who is doing what, when and where, and so on. How many hours are the students expected to do in the workplace, and who is signing the documents, and so on and so on. So it's a very important document to use when you start off with a new partner. So everybody agrees on what's going to happen during the mobility. The learning agreement is also a really important document for the individual participating in the mobility, because this document is where the learning experience is made concrete. And there are 3 parties signing this document, so everybody agrees. It's the individual. This is what I'm going to do during the mobility, and the host and the receiving organizations agreeing that this is what we are going to deliver and this is what we expect from the mobility period. So this is done before the mobility starts off. And I've been working with mobility for many, many years now, and I know that if you don't use ECVET, you develop your own similar documents, because this is needed. If the mobility is not about sightseeing, if a mobility experience is part of the educational program for a student, this is what is required, because otherwise you don't have a clue what the student is up to during these weeks of mobility. And of course, the Europass mobility is the crown of the mobility experience, because this document is where we recognize the learning experience, and for the individual to bring into his CV. And I know many employers that I've talked to, they not only value the international experience the students have, they say that, oh, just by reading about the learning activities in the Europass mobility, I understood what competence this individual had. So I can plan, I can organize, I can see him as an employee. So it's really important, this document. Yes, next slide, please. And learning outcomes, what's this then? This way to describe learning. A learning experience. It's about knowledge, it's about skills, or what the individual is able to do, and it's about competence, what the individual is competent enough to be responsible for. It's focus on output. So this way we guarantee this individual has achieved these learning outcomes. It's not about this individual has done 5 hours of welding. He can do this kind of welding activity. That's the learning outcome. And it's important that they are measurable, so they can be assessed. And as I told you, it's important to focus on what the learning experience is about, not how it's done and or where or how many hours. I previously said that the competence dimension of learning, the learning outcome concept, is about independence and responsibility. So it's much more a question of how do the student need supervision, tutoring, or can he work on his own? That's the competence. I know there has been great discussions about why do we use the word competence, because isn't it the entire picture? Yes, next slide, please. The added value we see from using ECVET for mobility is that we can establish a closer relationship with our partners abroad. We understand each other better, and we also it's easier to distribute the tasks that need to be done to organize real nice mobility. So we also see that from just having these discussions about roles and responsibilities before we conduct mobilities, we get to know each other. So we become more like colleagues rather than just buying a service from an intermediate organization for mobility. We also see, of course, that we can offer more attractive learning opportunities for our staff and students if we are clear about what we expect from mobility. Of course, they have a better experience abroad. We also see that in the workplace, when the students eventually arrive in the workplace, it's more they are more better prepared. The tutors knows the students. We use the Europass CV as well, so we have great information to the workplace and the tutors, so they have organized the training period in a very good way. So our students also stay, they do the entire mobility period. They don't go home because they were afraid or something like that. And of course, yeah.
Pernilla, you have to finish in 30 seconds.
Yep. Okay. Yes, and of course we see that using the ECVET platform and the Europass platform, we also contribute to the individual's lifelong learning, and it's really important. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. The way we describe the learning, we use units of learning outcomes. It's similar to a course description, but you see here in this unit of learning outcomes, we describe what the students have, what competence he or she has before the mobility. We describe for this specific unit the work tasks we expect, and we also, as you see, describe the details about what knowledge, skills, and competences we expect from this unit of learning outcome. Okay, next slide. That was all from me, and I hope I have managed to make the EasyVet concept a little bit more clear to everybody. And I hope you will be inspired enough to try to use these documents in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pernilla. It was very inspiring. And I think some of us will get in contact with you after this webinar. So thank you so much. And now is our last but not least speaker. I have the honor to present our speaker, Maja Ivanova, and you are policy officer at the DG Employment. When you're not also familiar with abbreviations, it's the General Directorate for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission. And you are expert in the field of qualifications and transparency tools. And you are involved in the development and implementation of the European qualification framework. And you follow a number of other skills initiatives, such as validation policies and Europass. Maja, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation and being able to introduce one of the key initiatives that we have at DG Employment linked to increasing transparency of qualifications. Just a quick check that you can see my slides and hear me well.
We hear you well and see everything.
Okay,
thank you, Maja.
perfect. Thank you very much. Indeed. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I will give you a quick overview of the European Qualifications Framework, or the so-called EQF, which I think touches upon quite some of the presentations that were already delivered earlier today. So I think it's a nice wrap up as well. And then I will give you a couple of examples of how the EQF can be used, and also where you can find further information if you're interested to dive into the EQF world. So let's start with the purpose, the elements, and the governance of the EQF. So I think in the previous presentation it was highlighted very well what a rich and diverse landscape of qualifications we have in different countries, and the fact that qualifications, and not only in VET, reflect the national rules and traditions. And as a result, sometimes it is difficult to understand well what a qualification achieved in a certain context means in another. And it is exactly this challenge that the European Qualifications Framework aims to address. So its objective is to improve the transparency, comparability, and portability of qualifications. And by doing so, it also aims to have a wider impact, for example, to increase employability and mobility by making it possible for individuals to access more jobs or to access further training. It also aims to foster lifelong learning, and this is linked to the fact that the EQF really tries to bring together in a comprehensive manner all types of qualifications and formal and informal learning as well. And last but not least, it also aims to support modernization of education and training systems. And this is closely linked to the fact that the EQF really also relies a lot on the use of learning outcomes, which were explained very well in the previous presentation. So what is the EQF? I think this is really the core slide of my presentation. So the EQF is, in a sense, a translation device. So it is a framework that makes it possible to compare the meaning of a qualification in one country or one context, one sector, with a qualification in another. The EQF consists of 8 levels with a progressive level of proficiency. So level 1 is the first one, level 8 is the highest. And each of these levels is described based on learning outcomes. So they're level descriptors that define what is the knowledge, the skills, responsibility, and autonomy that an individual is expected to have upon completing this level. And the EQF levels, as I mentioned, really include and cover all types and all levels of qualifications. So they're not limited only to qualifications issued by formal education and training. They also include qualifications issued by other organizations. And what happens is that the individual countries have national qualifications frameworks. These could have more or less than 8 levels. This reflects the national systems. And their national qualifications frameworks are referenced to the European one, following a very specific set of criteria. And when multiple countries do that, it becomes possible to compare indirectly through this reference to the EQF the qualifications from different national contexts. So this is what this visual tries to represent how the different countries link to the EQF, and in this way you can compare them with each other. And here it's important to also point out that the EQF is not limited only to the 27 member states. And so we have a total of 38 countries that participate to the EQF process. So this includes also the European Economic Area countries, candidates, potential candidates countries, and Switzerland as well. So the EQF is broader than the European Union only. Then just a quick word on the governance or the basis for the EQF. So it's a long-standing tool. It was introduced in 2008 with a council recommendation, which was then updated following an evaluation. And the update took place in 2017, which is the current basis for this tool. Important also to point out that this is not a legally binding instrument. So member states are invited to implement it, and it's really a voluntary procedure. However, as I will show in a little bit, it has really been taken up by the member states already. So we really see that it is a tool that is used and there is commitment to its implementation. With regards to its governance, there we distinguish between, well, 2 levels. So at the EU level, we have the EQF advisory group, which consists of representatives from all EQF countries that participate to the process, representatives of the social partners, education and training providers, ETF, CEDEFOP, so really a broad range of stakeholders. And at this group, we discuss the referencing process for each country, because it is really important that there is a lot of transparency and discussion in this process. But also we discuss other key issues on how to further increase transparency and further implement the EQF. And then at national level, there are the so-called EQF national coordination points, which support then the implementation on the ground in each member state. So what are the key areas of work linked to the EQF? Here also we can distinguish between what happens at member state level and also the discussions that take place at EU level. So member states, really one of the key activities that they have is that they reference their national frameworks to the European one. And as I said, this happens in the EQF advisory group via very extensive and interesting to read referencing reports that the countries prepare. Member states also have a number of actions that aim to increase the information that is available on the topic. So, for example, they are responsible for indicating EQF levels on different qualification documents, but also in national databases and registers. Because, of course, preparing the referencing report is one key step, but this information needs to also reach the end users. So individuals, workers, employers or education and training providers. And then it's just important that this information is widely accessible. And then member states also coordinate the work of the national coordination points. And on the other hand, as I said, we have a couple of activities at EU level, and I just wanted to highlight some of the discussions that we've been having and ongoing work, which takes place mostly in the form of different project groups or peer learning activities. So one of the key questions, of course, is to ensure that comparability, that qualifications are comparable across contexts. And in this regard, for example, we have international qualifications. So these are qualifications that are not issued within a national context, but for example, by social partners or multinational companies. And of course, it is important that they're integrated in a similar manner in different national frameworks. So in order to achieve that, we've been working on voluntary procedures to exchange information between member states to make sure that these qualifications are reflected in a similar way. We have also been exploring the comparison of the European framework with frameworks outside the EQF countries, so other regional or third country frameworks. Here we have pilot projects ongoing with Ukraine and a couple of other ones in the pipeline. And really the idea here is to improve the comparison and understanding also with frameworks outside the EQF community, let's say. And then a last point I would like to highlight is also the work that we've been conducting on better understanding how learning outcomes are used in different countries. So what is the guidance that exists, how are qualifications being described in terms of learning outcomes, and how this information can be presented in an even more accessible manner to the end users. So as you see, really on the one hand, we have the implementation of the EQF. On the other hand, we also have some strategic discussions that are led with the idea to provide guidance and procedures where possible in order to increase further the transparency. And before I wrap up with some further information, just a quick overview of the implementation status of the EQF. So all 38 countries that participate in the process have national qualification frameworks, and 36 of them have referenced already to the EQF. Some of them have also already even updated their initial referencing report. And as you see, the majority of these countries also already indicate EQF levels on certificates, diplomas, supplements, or databases and registers. So really, there has been a really good uptake of this tool at national level. And then to conclude, so who is it for? The EQF really aims to support a wide set of stakeholders, as I said, individuals and employers, in order to help them better understand what can they expect from certain qualifications, but also what does a qualification from another country means, for example, in their own context. Education and training providers as well, for example, if they need to assess a qualification from a different context, and how would it translate in their own recognition bodies, but also national authorities. And then if you're interested, I just wanted to highlight a couple of further readings or tools that might be of help. The information on the EQF is centralized and provided on the Europass platform. There is a dedicated section. There, for example, you can find a comparison tool, an interactive tool that allows you to select 2 countries. And when you click on them, you see how the national framework of one country relates to the framework of another. Also, the referencing reports that countries prepare are available on the Europass platform, and they provide a very good overview of national systems and frameworks. CEDEFOP also prepares an inventory of national qualification frameworks. And of course, the EQF national coordination points in your countries might be an interesting institution to contact if you want to learn more about it. And their contact details are also available on the Europass platform. And of course, you can always get in touch with us if you have any questions. So in a nutshell, this was a brief introduction of the EQF. I hope that it was helpful and it gives you an idea of what this tool is. And I see we're exactly at 11:30, but of course, if you have any questions now or following the webinar, I'm more than happy to address them. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maya. It was very interesting and useful for all of us, and very concrete. That's very good. So a big thank you to you. We have a question, a short question.
I would just like to add to Maya's excellent presentation that it's when you start working on learning outcomes, the indicators at the EQF levels are very useful, the language to find the right words. So that's a recommendation from my point.
Thank you, Pernilla. And I say thank you to all speakers and all participants. And I think Noelia and Tina, you would say something at the end.
Thank you, Camila. Well, in the first place, I would like to thank very much the participants for remaining with us all the time. Hope you have learned maybe not as much as I did, but maybe even more. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much to all the speakers. I think it's been very interesting, and you have made it very dynamic and interesting. I think there are many things that we couldn't cover, and that's why we had with Camila in mind to maybe organize second edition of the workshop where we can actually go more in depth into some of the tools. We will let you know, all of you. The session has been recorded, as you know, so it will be available for all of you and also for your colleagues if they want to listen to what had happened today. It will be available on the RegALE website. If you want to continue the discussion, please follow us on Twitter as well. And then a final thing, as we mentioned at the beginning, this was going to be the first webinar of a series of 11 that are taking place under the RegALE project that is funded by the European Union. So the second webinar is already has already a date set. It will take place on the 15th of December. It's going to be organized, managed by EAEA, and about financing of adult education. So we hope to see many of you there. And now I don't know if Tina or Camila will have anything else to add. Otherwise, a big thank you from EARLALL and from me. Thank you.
So I would just quickly like to add that as Noelia already said, we are going to have the second webinar on 15th of December. You can follow our social media or our newsletters and see what you can register, and it's going to be about financing adult education. Thanks to everybody that participated toward the questions, and we are going to share everything with you later on.
Thank you, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.